and industry. We have a great group. I just want to start by letting everyone know that the call is recorded today. So if you miss any portion of the call or want to re-listen to it later, we will send around the link, and we'll make sure you all can watch it again. Everyone, most of you have joined us through the Microsoft Teams platform, which is a lot like Zoom and WebEx, Cisco WebEx. So it's pretty intuitive. For those of you that want to be visible when we ask questions, you can turn your camera on or off. You can also mute or unmute yourself. We are starting out by muting everyone in the meeting right now while the presentation is ongoing, and we'll allow you to unmute yourself a little bit later when we take questions. There's also a chat box kind of to the right of your bar on the screen. And so if you want to ask a question via the meeting chat, you can also do it that way as well. So I'm so proud that we have with us two really fantastic speakers that are experts on the immigration front. And one of them, I think, is having trouble joining. So we may actually start with Navneet first, even though Anurag was going to speak first. Anurag, I see that you're back in. Are you able to be visible now? Did you get your chance?
I actually have. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I cannot understand why it says no camera available, because Amy, you were kind enough to do a test call where the camera worked. So,
yeah.
But I'm on. Maybe is it okay if Navneet goes first?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. So I'll kind of give some welcoming remarks, and then if you want to keep trying to sort out your camera, that's great. If not, we can hear you, so that's fine too. And we can see Navneet, so he'll be your better looking half while you speak, I guess.
He always is.
Yeah. But first, let me just welcome everyone. Thank you for those of you joining the meeting, USIBC members and chamber members. As many of you know,
Amy, we lost your voice. We can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Yes, now it's perfect.
Now it's perfect. Okay. And thank you, everyone, working through some of the technology issues. If you can't hear me, just unmute yourself and let me know. But we also have a great group today joining us from the Chamber's Immigration Working Group as well. So I think we have a really diverse set of stakeholders on the immigration front, and a lot going on. So it's a perfect time to convene and meet and hear from two experts on this. So those of you not familiar with Navneet Chugh, he's the managing partner and founder of his law firm, Chugh Law, one of the largest H-1B filers in the country. Mr. Chugh has extensive experience in a variety of corporate tax, immigration, litigation, and mergers and acquisition matters, and is the first president of the North American South Asian Bar Association, co-founder of TIE Southern California, and various other organizations. He's well esteemed in the areas of immigration law. So welcome, Navneet, with us. And then Anurag Varma is the head of global government affairs for Infosys, a global technology consulting firm where he develops and executes public policy strategies involving national and regional governments in each of the company's key markets. So thank you, Anurag, for joining us. What I'd like to do is invite Navneet to give some opening remarks on what we're seeing on the immigration front as a result of the COVID pandemic, particularly some of the regulatory and legal pronouncements being made on extension of H-1Bs, the president's announcement yesterday or 2 days ago now on the suspension of green card applications. And also, Navneet, would love to hear from you on some of the questions you're getting from your clients on how companies should be handling some of these tough issues and what some of the advice is that you're giving to them. So Navneet, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll move on to hear from Anurag.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Good morning, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Amy, for arranging this, and thanks to USIBC for doing such a great job building a bridge between the largest and the oldest democracies in the planet. It's been a pleasure to be involved with USIBC, and I think with the trade growing between the countries and the interactions increasing, we all know that this century belongs to United States, China, and India. And so I think USIBC is playing a great role. Yes, it's been very unprecedented times for everyone. Nobody thought that a tiny virus that you can't even see would bring the world down on its knees and would have such an impact. And we're also realizing what a global community we are. Every business is hurt in some way, shape, or form, medium size, small, large, doesn't matter. On top of it, the immigration front, people are very nervous. And this administration, as we all know, has not been the friendliest to the immigration world. But life is going on. India and US are two balloons tied to each other when it comes to technology. And I think if it gets squeezed on one end, the air goes to the other. And the questions we're getting largely are, first, I want to share some good news, or two bits of good news. One, that the world has been through enough, and this is nothing compared to what the world's been through, and we shall overcome this as well. We've been through a lot, even when the world wasn't this educated or technologically advanced. We connected, and the governments are cooperating with each other, so we shall overcome this. It's a matter of time. And the second good news is that the government has come up with wonderful packages and programs to help everyone, individuals, small businesses, and medium-sized and large businesses. Individuals, for instance, have wonderful unemployment benefits for those that are unfortunate to have lost their job. You can pull money out of retirement accounts. Everybody is supposed to be getting a check at $1,200. 80 million people have already received their check. You're fortunate if you got the check. And if you're not getting the check, then you're fortunate that you made more than $100,000 last year. And for small businesses, the government has extended the biggest help. The 33 million businesses in the United States, 30 million of them are small businesses based on number of employees. And if you have under 500 employees, there is all kinds of loans available, including loans that will be forgiven under PPP. The government is giving 2.5 times your monthly payroll, including retirement benefits and taxes, state taxes, and medical dental insurance. And if you use the money to make payroll and pay these other expenses, the government will forgive the loan. In addition to that, for medium and large businesses, there is wonderful loans available. 2%, 3%, 4%. There's all kinds of loans available. So don't give up. Please apply. One of the loans, the largest loan available, is for 25 years. One of the loans for economic injury is $2 million up to 30 years at 3.75%. So it's amazing that we live in a country where the government has the willpower and the guts and the money to be able to do this. All US had to do is go out in the market and borrow $2 trillion at 0.75%. So that's the good news. Please make sure you take advantages of all of these. And Amy, with immigration, the number one question we're getting obviously is that, hey, we can furlough our green card holders and US citizens and tell them we don't have any work. Sorry, we'll call you in a month or 3 weeks, and you don't have to pay these employees. Unfortunately, for employees you have that are on H1 or L1 visa, you cannot furlough them because you made a deal with the government when you hired them. you did an LCA and promised to Department of Labor and USCIS that you shall be paying them and you will not bench them no matter what. In 2008 crisis, the same thing happened and companies tried to bench people and got into trouble. And the same thing now. USCIS or DOL have not come out with any regulations or any break that you can furlough H1L1 employees, which means that you have to pay them. And then, Amy, the clients ask often, hey, my client furloughed all their employees and sent my H1 workers home, so why can't I furlough them? Because my client furloughed them. And my answer is very simple. Your client did not do the H1, you did. Your client did not promise to the government that you'll pay them, you did. So now carry on and pay them. And there's other solutions that we're telling clients on what to do. I thought I'd take a break and see if you have any other questions, Amy. Okay, so the other solutions for H1L1 are you can file an amendment and reduce their wages. You can cut them to part-time and file an amendment. It requires filing an actual amendment with the government, with USCIS. With L1 employees, you have a little more flexibility since there was no LCA or DOL promise to pay a certain wage. If it is a minor adjustment for a month or two, some lawyers take the stance that it's not material enough and you can just reduce their salaries for 30 days or 45 days and even make it up later. And some, of course, feel that more than a 15-20% salary change is a material change and a new L1 amendment should be filed. With some of the other things that we're telling clients to do is the government has given this wonderful PPP program. They'll pay wages for 2 months, but companies that are not eligible or have more than 500 employees, they can get benefit from a payroll tax credit, roughly about $5,000. So let me just, for simplicity, let me just say that if you do not qualify for a PPP loan, you can get $5,000 per employee for employees that you are paying, but they are not working for whatever reason, obviously related to COVID. So for the larger companies that are not availing of PPP, please take advantage of this $5,000 per employee tax credit. This tax credit is not available if they're able to work and only available if they're not able to work. And the other good benefit that's out there for businesses is deferral of payroll tax credit. So as you know, every employer in the United States pays 7.65% of Social Security tax, and that the employer has to dig in their pocket and pay it. And so the government is saying, we'll give you an interest-free loan, don't pay it to us, pay us half of it in December of 2021, a year and a half from now, and pay us the other half in December of 2022, 2.5 years or longer from now. Amy, any other questions?
I think, thank you, Navneet. I think what we can do is we can pause there. Anurag, thankfully, has worked out his video issue, I think. Anurag, if you want to just say hello to everyone, I think it would be good to pivot to Anurag for a few minutes and hear from him a little bit in terms of how he's seeing things, both on the policy front and from the corporate perspective. And then maybe, Navneet, we can come back to you for a few reactions to what Anurag has said. And then we'll start to also take questions from everyone. As I mentioned, we do have everyone on mute right now, but we will allow you to both ask questions into the box as well as unmute yourself and ask questions directly. So Anurag, do you want to offer a few thoughts from the corporate perspective?
Sure. I hope this is coming through okay and that you can see me and hear me.
We can. Hello.
Hi, good morning. I'm in California. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and I get to have the joy of speaking to all of you first thing. So thank you, USIBC. Thank you, Navneet and others, and just a real pleasure to be here. I will say, in California, March 13th was the big day. On the 13th of March, California ordered lockdown, and it really hit us first. And we, again, as Navneet mentioned, this is unprecedented. And so, first and foremost, for all of you on the call and your family and friends, I echo Navneet's comments that I hope everyone is safe and healthy. For the Infosys population in the United States, we have probably, I'll say, several thousand employees who are on visas, and the immediate first thing that struck us in as shutdown happened was the issue of expiring visas. And I remember speaking to an employee whose visa was expiring on March 16th, and it was March 13th. And he was having trouble getting flights. His daughter was a U.S. citizen, and India was giving orders that only Indian nationals could return back to India. And thus it began, and we had to deal with this idea that mobility would be an issue, and especially when it related to Indian nationals. I think it was about a week later that the Indian government shut down and even closed all flights, and would not even accept Indian nationals. So we had this issue where we had probably close to 1,200 employees whose visas were expiring or had expired or were going to expire within about 90 days. And what do we do to help them? And this was not just an issue in the United States. This was an issue in all markets outside of India, Europe, Australia, Canada. Uh, uh, so we immediately started talking to the administration and Capitol Hill about what they were going to do for this population. The folks whose visas were expired or expiring, because at that point they had a cloud of uncertainty over them because public health guidance said that they should not travel. Secondly, that the flights were no longer available to go back to India. And third, could Infosys pay them if they were on an expired visa? And the answer to the last one, of course, is no. I mean, you can't pay an employee a salary if they're not on a valid visa in the United States. So England and France issued blanket extensions on all work authorizations. And that set the precedent that we took to the administration and to Capitol Hill. And we also took it to the Australian government, which is the Canadian government. But the idea is that the best solution for this category of workers was to get a blanket extension. Navneet has articulated that they could obviously file one by one for individual extensions. That doesn't help someone who's at the 6-year cap for their H-1B because that person cannot be extended. So there was a lot of uncertainty in the air. We ended up finding a legal way to give living stipends and helping these families. But it really would have helped if the administration had taken an automatic extension route the way England and France did. And we spoke with not just the U.S. Chamber, the U.S. India Business Council has an immigration working group that we work closely with, and many other organizations. And collectively, the entire community of employers launched an advocacy effort. That effort to date has not had the success we've wanted. And so we continue to look for paths forward. The House of Representatives has actually drafted language to solve this problem. That language was proposed in the Phase 3 relief bill, which was the bill that was passed about a week and a half ago. And Navneet has articulated some of the benefits coming out of that bill. But the language to extend work authorizations, although proposed, was not passed. We're hopeful that the next bill from Congress on relief will include such language. However, the date for Congress coming back into session keeps getting pushed out. So, at some point it becomes moot, where people will be safe to travel back to India. But as it stands right now, it continues to be an effort we're working on. I will mention the American Immigration Lawyers Association has filed a lawsuit on this point and sued the government, hoping to get what we call injunctive relief, to get the government to act on this extension of visas. Again, with all litigation, it's unclear as to success possibilities, but there are a lot of people working hard to try to get an extension for this group of people on visas and expiring visas. Amy, I'm going to stop on that issue. I don't know if you want me to go broader, but that's where I'll stop.
No, thank you. Thanks. That's helpful for setting context. I want to sort of dive a little bit deeper into what both of you have said. And I want to just remind everyone right now, if you have any reactions to what Navneet or Anurag have said, you can use your chat box to ask questions or seek clarity. And we'll give you also some time at the end to ask some questions. But we talked a little bit about, what Congress may be doing down the road to provide some benefits to those people. I want to also hear from both of you on the executive order that came out. From your understanding, what does that cover? Does it cover a suspension of immigration only on green cards? Does it cover other types of immigration routes like H-1Bs? And is it going to have an impact on, obviously there's the travel restrictions of H-1Bs coming into the country. Even if they have an H-1B, they can't necessarily get on a plane right now to come. But how are you all reacting to that type of announcement, both from a policy point of view as well as a practical point of view?
Hey, Amy, this is John. If you want, I can jump in. I can't see my face because I'm driving to pick up my son.
Okay.
But I can chat on the EO before Anurag and me opine. But as of right now, it doesn't affect non-immigrant visa holders. It is strictly applying to green card holders and only to a certain subset of them, particularly those that don't have any real connection to the United States. So someone who has never worked here, someone who didn't have one as of the date of implementation, which is today at 11:59 at night. The concern that I have on any implications for H-1Bs or Ls or any non-immigrant visa program is with regard to this report that is required under Section 6 of the order. This report is going to be put together by DOL and DHS, and they're going to be consulting with the State Department on it. But to make a long story short, they're going to be studying the economic impacts that non-immigrant visa holders have on America. It has been made clear to me by my friends both in DHS and DOL that this report is not going to be all sunshine and roses for non-immigrant visa programs. And, the Stephen Miller and Ken Cuccinelli wing are going to be using this as a way to come after not just H-1Bs, but H-2Bs, folks that are working on OPT, individuals that have work authorization because they're an H-4 dependent spouse. Like, those are things that they have a real bee in their bonnet over, and that's what they're going to be going after with this.
Got it.
That said, if you have connections with both DOL and DHS, I highly suggest that you reach out to them and let them know of all the good things that your non-immigrant visa holders, not just H's, but L's, E's, TNs, O's, P's, whatever visa classification that you have on your payroll, let them know all the good things that they're doing, because they need all the firepower that they can muster to go against Miller and Cuccinelli, who will have Mark Krikorian and Rosemary Jenks and all of our favorite cast of characters that want to restrict immigration into the U.S.
Got it.
So that's a big
helpful
takeaway.
context, John. I think what we can do too is talk a little bit more about the advocacy step here. So thanks for that, and I want to give Anurag and Navneet a chance to react, and then maybe we're getting some questions through the chat function too, so we can circle back to sort of the next step or the potential next steps that this may go into. So Anurag or Navneet, do you have reactions to what John said or the EO in general?
I do. Can if Navneet, if you don't mind, let me just give directly to John. I think first of all, John and the U.S. Chamber have been tireless in their efforts to protect this notion that that immigrant workers are absolutely a priority in the wake of a functioning economy. We can't forget that that there is a workforce that comes from other places to help us, and that's very important. I will say John's point is actually bigger than his point. There is this report that is in the executive order. I couldn't agree any more with John that the report that will come out talking about our crisis right now, our health crisis, the economic recovery, and the role of immigrant workers needs as many stories as possible, showing the value across verticals and industries. But more broadly speaking, we have seen over the last several years a constant chipping away at these programs where it comes to high-tech workers. I'll speak to that because that's my industry. A constant chipping away and tightening of restrictions and adjudications. So this might be a good time for everyone to get into lockstep per John's advice and say that let's really figure out and identify and articulate and not take for granted that as our economy recovers from one of the most devastating moments that it has faced in history, that we should really come together to articulate the value that overseas help in the mode of these workers has and can benefit us. And so this idea that we're going through a historically bad moment of unemployment, it's not a one-for-one. That if you block a tech worker from coming into the United States, that there is the exact American with certain credentials that can actually do the job. That this is a global collective effort that America has always used. And how do we tackle it together? So that's a long way of agreeing with John.
Thanks, Anurag. Navneet, do you have any reactions to what Anurag or John? And I should mention, for those of you that don't know, John Baslici, who spoke before Anurag, leads the immigration work and labor work at the Chamber. So thanks, John, for that. But Navneet, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad the order is not what it was said to be a few days ago, that all immigration is banned and restricted, and specifically there was an exemption for H-1 workers and L-1 workers. So I'm glad that didn't happen. The fact that all immigration is restricted is kind of surprising because I don't know who was coming to the United States to begin with these days. So I think it's largely a message to his base. What is worrisome, though, is that the door has been opened and the administration has been asked to come back with more recommendations. So now that it went from very bad to just a little bad, so that the next round won't seem as bad. And so that's the worrisome part, is the warning shot that has been fired. So far, it's only people that don't have their green card processing finished and are outside the country that they cannot enter for 60 days. Then that'll get extended. People can still file for applications for green cards, so that has not stopped. But it's a warning shot, and I think the worst we have yet to see.
Yeah. Well, we've had quite a few questions come in through the chat box, so let me continue the conversation. One question, I think, Navneet, this might be more for you, but Anurag, you can chime in as well. How are you managing H-1B LCA postings during the COVID situation? Are those still going on, Navneet?
Yes, the LCA postings are going on. There is some flexibility that DOL has given. Amy, I just was wondering, I have 2 lawyers from my firm that have joined in. Any way we can have them respond to some of these questions with me?
Sure. If they want to take themselves off of mute and offer their thoughts on that as well, and they can turn their camera on if they'd like to respond.
Okay, that'll be great. So Dia and Jagan, if you're there.
Yes, hi.
Go ahead, Dia.
Okay, you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, on the LCA posting itself, I think the majority of questions that we've had from employers are in relation to employees who now work from home. So presumably they work at home close to the original work site, right? The original client work site. And the requirement from Department of Labor, nonsensical as it might seem, is that the LCA, the original LCA, has to be posted at the employee's work home location. And so, it's just a matter of getting the LCA posted. Sometimes employers come back and say that, oh, the employee doesn't have a printer at home. What do we do? So there is a solution for that. We prepare an extract and have the employee post that. One of the relaxations that Department of Labor has also made right now is that for any LCA, when it is filed, the posting obligations apply, but they've agreed to a 30-day extension of the posting requirement. So that's also helpful, in today's situation. So that's generally what we are doing for LCA postings.
Great, thank you. Anurag, anything you want to say on that, or?
I think she mentioned, and there was a little bit of disruption there, but I think she mentioned that the LCAs are the Department of Labor is relaxing the guidelines on the LCA. I believe was so. Therefore, if you're working from home, you don't need to file an amendment. But and again, the Department of Labor has been a little bit better than the Department of Homeland Security in terms of making accommodations in this time for affected populations. And again, the Department of Homeland Security needs to be better on this.
Okay, thanks. Neil from TCS sends in a question about, and I know we talked a little bit, John did, and just now on the potential another executive order, we'll call it EO 2.0. But if that is extended to H-1Bs, do you foresee an exemption for essential workers? And I'd welcome John to offer any thoughts on that as well. I know at least in the first executive order, there were exemptions, I think, for seasonal workers and a few others. But first, let me see if John has any thoughts on that, and then I'll turn to Anurag and Navneet on that.
Amy, I can keep this short and sweet. We will be pushing for that. And the reason why is, and I don't want to go too much into giving background on where we were Monday night, early Tuesday morning, but given what the EO could have been, like their idea of what essential was workers that are in food production, which isn't just, crop workers on farms. That's the guys and gals up in Alaska that are processing salmon in June and July, the crabbers out in the eastern shore of Maryland and in coastal Carolina, and your lobster folks up in Maine. So with them, your healthcare workers and your COVID researchers, all of those people, like, that was it. Which to me and to many other people in DHS was a slap in the face to the CISA guidelines that clearly stated all these workers in all these other categories are also in an essential critical infrastructure. And if that concept is good enough for the goose, it should be good enough for the gander. Now, we know clearly that Mr. Cuccinelli and Mr. Miller think that those guidelines, the CISA guidelines, are way too broad, and they don't want that in there. But my hope is that now, having Kushner as energized as he is, and getting him and many others to pipe up during the past, 48 hours now, to get the EO to where it is today, where it's more or less a press release with a 30-day review. It's something that I hope that we can get a situation where if the administration decides to do a second EO, they will have broader exemptions than what they were thinking about late Monday and early Tuesday.
Anurag or Navneet, any thoughts on a little bit?
Amy, your audio.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, do you have any thoughts on what John said? I know it's a little bit predicting the future.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. Again, for the millionth time, I agree with John. But I will say that there's also going to be shifting sands. We are, as a country, we're moving from middle of crisis to thinking about recovery, and during recovery, again, we've never been in this situation. We don't know where it's going and where the priorities will be. But John is right. We have to be big tent about this, and understand that you can't just say there's three groups of workers that matter. This is a gigantic economy, and there's lots of different groups. So putting on my Infosys hat, of course, we have technology workers that support the development of pharmaceuticals, that support biosciences, but we also have those who support manufacturing, the ability to manufacturing jobs and retail. And so where this goes and where the needs are and the types of workers you need, everything is integrated. It's horizontally integrated and vertically integrated. And so understanding what workers are needed to solve the problem of the day has to be delineated in a big tent kind of way.
Yeah. Navneet, I want to get your reaction to that, but I also want to hear, we had one question about H-1B processing times. And so I wanted to see if you could also give the audience, you and your colleagues, a snapshot onto whether the current situation has increased H-1B processing times and whether you foresee that getting worse down the road as well.
Jagan or Dia, you want to take that? Jagan's from our Washington, D.C. office and Dia from our Edison, New Jersey office.
Yes, Navneet, thank you. We do anticipate that these kind of regulations would probably put a delay in processing on the H-1Bs. Obviously, everybody has seen that USCIS is also doing telework, and a change in is also expected in terms of how they will look at these applications, considering that there's a large number of unemployment filings going on. USCIS has just closed the random selection process for H-1B cap petitions too, and most people who have been selected are yet to file their petitions. Now, if the EO that spoke about Section 6 that spoke about potential report on effect of the non-immigrant programs is expected to be made, and some sort of second EO is issued that will affect non-immigrant programs, then it is expected that there will be a delay in H-1B processing time. Moreover, I think maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, USCIS also had issued a public announcement that there would be a delay in processing of some petitions this year.
So to add to that, Amy, as of now, although the premium processing option is suspended, the processing times are fairly good. Even without the premium processing option at the moment, my personal experience has been that the H-1B and even the I-140 adjudications are going pretty well, and we're getting approvals fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you, Divya. We have quite a few questions coming in through the chat box. So let me get to one more here, and then I'll also allow people to open up their lines. This, I think, is for Anurag, but I know, Navneet, you and your colleagues may have some thoughts on it well. But Anurag, I believe you mentioned that for employees with expired visa statuses whom you can't continue to pay, you have found a legal way by paying families a stipend. Can you please elaborate on that? And we also had another question on the eligibility of unemployment benefits for H-1B workers who maybe are no longer employed but are stuck here. So Anurag or Navneet, if you want to offer some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, Anurag here. So we're working on a workaround on the payment. Not 100% sure how that might work. So I don't want to elaborate too much because we have lawyers who are working hard on it. But there is a concept that we could avoid the salary and try to provide some sort of living stipend. But it is something that I don't have a lot of information on. But
okay.
I will do this, Amy, is that I'll come back to you after speaking to the lawyers.
Yeah, how about Navneet, maybe you can offer some thoughts, or your colleagues, on eligibility for unemployment benefits and what you're advising both the companies as well as the individuals in this situation.
Right, Amy. So, in this difficult time, that's a question that we're being asked often. What do we do with these H-1 employees that can no longer work and they can't even travel back to India? So what we're telling clients and what people are doing is that before their last paycheck, of course, they can be given a bonus or severance package of some sort so that they have some money to live. And second, the company can extend some loans to them, either from their US offices or India offices, loans that the employees will have to pay back. Number three, there is a section 139 in the Internal Revenue Code, which has been rarely ever used, maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 100 years. And this section says that in the case of an emergency, like we have now, an employer has a great latitude to write a check to an employee, in essence, a gift of sorts. And usually when an employer gives a gift to an employee, even if it is a $5 a turkey, that's the limit in IRS, that you can give a turkey at Thanksgiving. Anything else has to go on their W-2. But Section 139 preempts that. And it says in times of emergencies like we have now, an employer can write a check to an employee, not added to their salary, not have to take taxes out, which means they don't need a work visa for that particular check, and the employer gets a tax deduction. So rarely does this happen in United States tax that an employer is able to write a check, pay some money, and get a tax deduction.
Right.
The employee doesn't have to pick it up as income. Now, some people have, to just give you a flavor of how broad this Section 139 is, some people have taken it to the extent that any employee incurring any additional expenses because of COVID-19 the employer can write a check to the employee. So for instance, if you have a daughter or son that's come back from college and is now at home, and your food costs have gone up because you're feeding one more person, then the employer has the right to reimburse the employee for extra costs that the employee is incurring. With regards to unemployment, unfortunately, H-1B employees are not eligible for unemployment. And the reason for that is that most state laws say that you have to be available to work and looking for work. But unfortunately, since the H-1 worker can't be looking for work and does not have work visa, they're not freely marketable. So the government says, well, you can't work in this country without an employer sponsorship. So you're not freely available to work. So then we can't pay you unemployment.
Yeah, it's a real bind that, maybe, John, we can think about advocacy around this issue as well. We do have a few more questions coming in through the chat box, but I also want to give those that have joined us a chance to ask the question. If you are on the Teams platform and you want to unmute your microphone on the center console and unmute your camera, if you want to be seen and want to ask a question, please feel free. If you're on the phone and you want to ask a question, you can hit *6. So I'll pause and give anyone on the line a chance if they want to ask a question. Okay, well, we can feel free at any time if anyone wants to. Otherwise, as I said, the chat box is active and we are receiving questions that way as well. I wanted to ask one question here, maybe for John, but Anurag and Navneet as well. If the new executive order includes H-1B workers, and I know, again, we're opining on something that could happen, could it affect people who have already received a receipt notice? I'm not familiar with what a receipt notice is, but maybe Navneet or John, if you have thoughts on that as well.
Well, trying to, go through this hypothetical, I would be remiss if I didn't say we're going to work extremely hard to make sure that it doesn't happen. And if it does happen, the impact is minimal. But as for folks who received a receipt notice, I think a lot of it is going to depend upon whether or not that individual's outside the country.
Right.
If you are inside the country, this EO is only dealing with the president's authority to control the entry of aliens into the U.S. You've already entered, like, there's nothing that this EO can do because you're already here. Now, for those people that are already here, don't leave because you're going to subject yourself to the same entry restrictions you had beforehand. But for those that are outside the country, and if you have a receipt notice, but you don't have an approval, I mean, to me, this is just the way that I'm hearing the question being phrased is, just because you have a receipt notice does not mean you have an approval in hand. You just mean like, all right, I got a receipt, like you got my H-1B. It hasn't necessarily been approved yet. I know that you're still looking at this. But if you have an approval, in the next 60 days, let's just game it out, maybe an extra 120 days. If on day 30, they say, hey, guess what? H-1Bs or certain H-1Bs, you can't come into the country. It begs the question as to how fast is USCIS actually going to process your H-1B? Because my guess is they're going to be delayed significantly. So you probably won't have any idea as to whether or not your workers are ready to come in. More importantly, if they're cap subject, they can't come in until October 1st anyway.
Right.
So hopefully by that point, the economy will have stabilized to such an extent where these extreme measures are no longer warranted, and the temporariness of this immigration ban will just be that, temporary.
Yeah.
And we'll be past it.
Well, we won't pass the election, so I don't know. But
yeah, but I hear you. Folks that I have talked to have told me point blank, if they feel compelled to keep extending this over and over again, that means that the economy is still in doldrums.
Yeah.
And that's not the place where anybody in this administration wants to be heading into an election.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that.
So
Okay.
I'm going to jump in here. Okay, if it's okay, Amy. I spoke to someone at the White House yesterday before the order came out, and he was very tight-lipped about a lot of things, of course, but he kept saying to me, "If you're here, you're okay," and he kept saying that over and over again. If you're here, you're okay. That kind of underscores where John was going with that question. The bigger picture that I want to make sure that when we leave this call we understand is that just like all of us sitting at home and not at airports and not in our offices, there is a new normal happening here. And we need to understand what that new normal is. And it is in the context of travel. It's in the context of movement of people. It's in the context of health and safety. And so the idea that visa processing and international travel is the same is thrown out the window. So I want to make sure as we leave this conversation, we focus on this idea that we're going through unprecedented unemployment, and that no matter how much we every day value foreign workers, we really need to articulate and define the value that visa holders add to specific industries, and we don't need to, and we cannot take it for granted anymore. We actually need to tell people. We need to tell the administration, tell Congress the exact reasons why the people that we bring in are absolutely needed and necessary for America's recovery and in this unprecedented time. So I think we just need to be very clear that all of us have to commit to verbalizing and talking about, in the U.S.-India corridor, which this call is U.S.-India Business Council, right, in this U.S.-India corridor, what the movement of people means to us and to this economy.
Right. I know we're continuing to get questions in the chat box. Navneet, I want to give you a chance to offer any thoughts that you have as well on this before turning to those.
Well, I think the market works, right? So even if the H-1 visa holders coming in on October 1 are barred or not barred, it's not like the US employers are bringing in these H-1 people into the country. There is no work. So most of these companies right now are struggling, deciding what to do with their current H-1 employees, how to pay them, not pay them, how to send them back. And so I don't think there is any import happening of any H-1 workers anytime soon. So the market shall dictate and things will be fine. What people forget is that 85,000 H-1B visa holders out of a 160 million US workforce is 0.0 something %.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as Anurag said, we got to keep, reminding people of that point, I think. Let me open it up one more time if anyone wants to ask a question by taking their microphone off of mute or hitting *6 on the line. I think we have time for one more question. Okay, if not there, I'm going to ask one last question we got in the chat box. I see that a few more are coming through. I know Navneet and others are also responding on the chat function. And as I said, we'll make sure to connect you afterwards in case we don't get to your question, so that we can get you an answer down the road. John and Anurag, you mentioned, I think if you are here, you are okay, as kind of the mantra of what you're hearing in the policy framework. What about students who are maybe graduating from a master's degree, they're entering their OPT this spring and counting on H-1B employment thereafter? How are you thinking about those types of employees? And do you foresee them being impacted as all? I mean, they're here, but they don't have their H-1Bs maybe yet.
Well,
Right.
Amy, they already have an underlying visa, and presumably they get OPT. They also have a job offer from a U.S. company. And to piggyback off of Anurag's point being made by his friends at the White House, they're here, they're okay under this order. Now, I am supremely confident that Ken Cuccinelli and Stephen Miller and their minions across DHS are looking for ways to make it more difficult for companies to hire OPT recipients, because they think with 30 million unemployed people, we're almost there. Not yet, but we're getting there. What I hear from the Labor Department, that there's going to be a push to try to do more things to protect the interests of American workers. And their way of protecting American workers is to make it more difficult for all types of immigrant workers, whether they're on OPT or in other classifications, to get jobs. So is this EO going to affect them? No. Maybe there's a second EO that's made in response to the report in Section 6 of this EO. Potentially it has something to do with it, but we're clearly not out of the woods.
Yeah. Navneet, let me turn to you and get what would you advise a client in this situation? And then any closing thoughts you want to offer, and then I'll also give Anurag the chance to offer some closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think the students are probably going to be the worst hit in all of this, because employers are struggling figuring out what to do with the job offers they have out there, and all new hiring is pretty much at a stop still for most industries. And if they can get some OPT workers, OPT visa, then and find a job, then that's their best bet for now. One very important thing I want to share with all of you, your listeners, or viewers, is that Amy, one of the biggest misconceptions out there right now is that if you are a company in the United States and you're owned by an Indian company, then you're not eligible for the payroll protection program loans that will be forgiven. And that's simply not true. I cannot tell you how many of my clients in India have not applied for these loans because they think Indian companies are not eligible. They're not Indian companies. They're American companies. They have US workers. SB and Department of Treasury have come out and said point blank, if you have workers with a US address, that's a US employee, and you can apply for loans. Who owns the company is irrelevant.
That's helpful advice, I think, on the Paycheck Protection Program. Thanks for that, Navneet. Anurag, closing parting thoughts from you?
Sure. I would like to end on something really rosy and wonderful, and I'll probably just do that with a joke later. But right now, I have to say that the next several months are going to be rocky, and I think every company on this call should really focus on articulating to the broader public, I mean, whatever channel you choose, whether it be a congressman, media, or whatnot, to really articulate why you see a value in a foreign worker in very specific points. We are at a very troubling time in terms of employment, in terms of the economic focus and level of this country, and we need to make sure that we hear that and we're not tone deaf. It's not business as usual right now, and I think that our company and many other companies really value a lot of the workers that we bring in from India and other places. And it's my job to be very specific on exactly the value that they bring. And I think we can't take for granted anymore, because it's not the new normal. So having said that, I will also leave with another specific thought, is that we also should talk about all that we're doing to help the essential workers, that we're helping new things that have hit. The Infosys Foundation in the U.S. has an education platform for computer science education that helps me, because I can just put my kids on a computer science education video for an hour, and then I get to join calls like this. But there's a lot of positives that all of our companies in the U.S. India corridor are providing at this time, and a lot of relief, and we should talk about that as well. So,
you raised a good point. Maybe we should employ some of the unemployed workers to, entertain our kids and keep them busy while we're all trying to do these video conferences.
I'll pay.
All our kids learn a little bit more coding. We will be well served, I'm sure. So, well, Anurag, thank you so much for joining us and for offering us your thoughts. And Navneet, we're very grateful for your expertise and guidance. I know we still do have a number of questions in the chat box. This will still be active for some time. So if anyone, wants to respond or offer more thoughts, they can. I also want to just give a shout out to John. Thank you for joining us and offering your expertise and guidance. And Jay Gullish, who actually leads our immigration working group and I think is on the call, is really and Abhishek Kishore are leading the immigration working group that meets monthly. The next one is on Thursday, May 7th. We welcome all of you to join, and I know Jay would be happy to share any information. So Jay, anything else you want to add there? Feel free to say something. Otherwise,
no, thank you. We encourage our members to join our monthly group. The idea is that we develop a community of interest to be tracking key issues on the legislative and regulation side. We pull forward some sort of pop-up events when important aspects of immigration, and so the monthly call is more on just touching base, sharing notes, and following what's going on. And then we also identify key topics that we want to do in-depth, deep dive like this today. And over the last couple of weeks, we've done a series of these. So I encourage you to reach out to John Baslici or I if you want to participate in those conversations. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jay. Well, thanks everyone again for joining us. It sounds like from everything we talked about, it may not be the last time we get together, unfortunately, to talk about some of the bumps ahead, but Anurag and Navneet have really provided some great guidance, so look forward to relying on them in the future. But most importantly, be well, be healthy, be safe, and look forward to connecting with you all virtually in the time being. So good evening to those of you joining from India, and good morning to those of you at rest in the U.S. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, MJ. Keep up the great work USIBC does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.